Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Everything Sports Podcast. We are here on this Monday, October 5th, and there's so much sports news going on this weekend. Crazy weekend of college football, and the MLB postseason is set. But, guys, let's just start out with some general news circulating around. Let's start out with some more recent news. Earlier this afternoon, the Dolphins fired their head coach, Mike Philbin. Avery, what do you think of this firing so far for the Dolphins?
Well, I mean, you could say it was a good fire. In the 3 seasons that he has been at the Dolphins, none of them have been winning seasons. And, the Dolphins are a very historic team, they're just very historic. And to have a coach that hasn't won a season, or hasn't a winning season yet, and get off to a 1-3 start against not too bad of a matchups is just, it's just not what they wanted from him. And now the interim head coach, Dan Campbell, is hoping, he's gonna try and make a big change in this, but we're not sure if he's gonna stay as the head coach or if they're gonna bring in an outsider next year. So I think this is a really interesting story. You don't see many coaches get fired in week 4, so I think this is just huge development for the Dolphins.
And Jack, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, it's obviously crazy because it's so early. I think it's a really bad call. I mean, he's had some tough years. Haven't been able to get any winning seasons going, but it's the first 4 games. I mean, you can't just all of a sudden, judge the season by the first 4 games. I mean, I don't understand if they get up to being, 1-5, that's a bit more reasonable. But 1-3, I mean, it's not a terrible start. I mean, yeah, it's not a good one, but it's definitely not one that should be right away firing. So I kind of disagree with this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would kind of have to go along with Jack. I can certainly understand the Dolphins, had a decent year last year. They didn't make the playoffs, but it was certainly an improvement. And definitely early in the season to go after this. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see how the Dolphins can regroup after this, and hopefully they can get back on track. And so some more news for you guys. On Saturday afternoon, Max Scherzer threw his second no-hitter of the season for the Washington Nationals. Max Scherzer is the first pitcher to throw 2 no-hitters in a season since Nolan Ryan did it back in 1973. So what do you guys think about Max Scherzer's no-hitter?
This is a very impressive guy. I mean, I'm not sure entirely how old he is, but I mean, he is just... I mean, he's a great pitcher, and he came from that Detroit Tigers there, and I think it was really bad for them to get rid of him because right now he is the greatest pitcher in the game. I mean, some may say Clayton Kershaw, but look how he did in the playoffs last year. He did not even show up. So I say, I mean, it's just great, cool things going on right now. So, yeah, that's about all I gotta say.
How about you, Avery?
I think this is a really big accomplishment. I think that, and I think what's the most interesting thing right here is that it was against the Mets, a playoff team this year, and that's just that's huge, and I think he just is really good for this team, with Strasburg has had troubles with injuries, Scherzer steps up and, 2 no-hitters. That's sort of once in a decade sort of thing. So, right. And what's also interesting is that 2 days later, they fire their manager. So I think that's just really interesting.
Yeah, going into that, as impressive as that no-hitter was, it certainly was not an impressive season for the Washington Nationals. Coming into this year in spring training, many MLB analysts thought that the Washington Nationals were World Series favorites, and I would have certainly agreed with that as well, but obviously the Nationals just kind of fell apart in August, and it got pretty bad with Matt Williams there. And like you said, Avery, he did get fired by the Nationals this afternoon, as well as the entire coaching staff. So what do you guys think this means for the Nationals coming up here in the future?
They just got to regroup, keep Scherzer on some contracts, keep him there. They really got to. I mean, Bryce Harper, holy smokes, this kid has turned into something. He's turned into the potential that they looked at. A lot of people were saying he was going to be the next kind of Joe Mauer in his prime, but with a lot more power, and that's exactly what he has turned into. I mean, he's just a great player. I know he got more than 40 home runs this year. Bryce Harper is definitely becoming a very big favorite player in this MLB.
Yeah, I like Jack said. You gotta just sort of keep most of the players you have because this is a winning team still, but they missed the playoffs. But I think that if you keep most of the players around, try and find a better hire for a manager. This team's got a lot of young talent, and it's just really It's really depressing to see that they had such a bad season and that their manager is gone after a great game by Matt Scherzer.
Yeah, and to add to this stuff that you guys are saying, the Nationals are completely loaded with talent, with just pitching and outfield and stuff like that. But certainly injuries became a factor in why this team didn't succeed this season. But overall, it was just kind of a poor season for the Nationals. They really just have to put this behind them. Bryce Harper had a great season, though. He finished second in the NL in batting, so behind D. Gordon of the Miami Marlins, who won the batting title. But overall, the Nationals, it just was an unfortunate finish. They were in the standings for most of the year, but then the Mets just kind of came alive after they traded for Cespedes from Detroit. So it was just kind of the way things fell in place for the Nationals. So hopefully they will be able to get it back on track next year.
Yeah. So moving on with some more news. I know a team that's very close to Matt, the San Jose Sharks. Rafi Torres, a 41 game suspension for a head check on a player in the. I'm not sure who the player is. Matt, you could correct me on that. But,
yeah, it's Jakob Silverberg of the Anaheim Ducks.
Mm-hmm.
And did you want me to answer what I thought of this, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was certainly expecting a suspension from this, no doubt. But 41 games, wow, I mean, that's huge. The NHL has not handed out very many large suspensions in the past, and to put this into perspective, this is the second longest NHL suspension in history in the modern era. The only other one was like a 2-year suspension back in 1975. So obviously the NHL is making a bold move to suspend Rafi Torres for 41 games. It certainly brings some light to the awareness of concussions and stuff like that. Jakob Silverberg didn't suffer a concussion, but if you watch the play, it was certainly a dirty hit, and Rafi Torres has definitely been a ordinary suspect for the Department of Player Safety. So I think it's a very big move for that Department of Player Safety to do this. I think it will. I hope it brings some certain aspects into play for some of the other sports like the NFL too, and targeting stuff like that. So I think it's definitely good, and for the Sharks in general, I don't think it's going to be too much of a loss for this team. He's more of a enforcer guy, doesn't get many points, and he missed all of last year with an injury, so I don't think it's going to hurt the Sharks too much. But off the ice and just injuries in general, it's definitely a big move for the Department of Player Safety to do so.
Yeah, and one more little piece of news going back to the MLB. CC Sabathia is now going to enter alcohol rehab, and he will not be pitching at all in this playoff. So this is a major loss for the Yankees heading into this playoff. Some wild card here going against Houston. I believe tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow.
Yep, tomorrow.
At home, but I mean, CC Sabathia is not going to be there, so that's really tough for the Yankees. But what do you think these Yankees are going to have to do in order to survive the playoffs without one of their top pitchers?
Well, I think for the Yankees, Masahiro Tanaka is going to be the pitcher in the wild card game, so that's certainly a help that the Yankees have to play in the wild card game and that they would not have to worry about Sabathia in the first round series. But this obviously comes as you lose a big arm in that rotation, and it's certainly going to hurt their chances if they are able to beat the Astros. So, it is going to be a really big blow for this team, and we will talk about the Yankees a little bit more. But yeah, certainly a big loss. To be honest with you, I don't even know if the Yankees will get past the wild card game, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show today. But yeah, definitely a big loss for the Yankees.
All right, so we've talked about some news just around the sports world. Now we're gonna transition into college football, and we're gonna take a quick break and then be right back. All right, and we're back here at the Everything Sports Podcast. We're going to talk about some college football, a crazy weekend, and Jackson James, he is going to ask us some questions, and we're going to discuss this weekend.
All right, guys. So, it was a crazy weekend, plenty of upsets. But I would like to ask you guys, out of 3 of these games, what do you think was the biggest upset? All right, so first, we're going to go with Arizona State topping number 7 UCLA 38-23, which is a big win for them. And another one we have is Iowa defeating Wisconsin 10-6. I believe before this game occurred, it was Iowa was not ranked, but it looks like they are ranked 22 now after that nice big win. And last but not least, I probably gotta go with this Florida and Ole Miss game. After Florida, number 25 being number 3, Ole Miss 38-10. So, which of those 3 do you think is the biggest one?
Well, all right. I definitely think it was Iowa over Wisconsin because, Iowa, and we discussed this a bit last episode, was, they are 4-0 team, and leading the West in the Big Ten, and so what happens is Iowa just basically dominates Wisconsin on defense, and they propel themselves to a 10-6 victory. And I think this is probably the most important game because what it does is it pushes Wisconsin out, and now Iowa is a big contender to win the Big Ten West division and possibly go up against Ohio State or Michigan State. So I think that this was most important because, as Matt said earlier the last episode, was that Iowa had a very easy preseason, and then to come in here and just beat Wisconsin at home is just a huge win and a huge upset for the Iowa Hawkeyes.
And yeah, for me, I'm gonna have to go with Florida over Ole Miss. For Ole Miss, this is a team that completely boosted their resume with that win over Alabama. So, for Ole Miss to come in and, against a Florida team, obviously this Florida team has been really impressive this season. But I think for Ole Miss to suffer this game, it really puts them back a ton and really into consideration of the college football playoff, or not in consideration. So, but then you got the whole other side of the story with Florida. This team looked amazing out there. They jumped 11 spots or 14 or 11, I can't remember which, but it's the second largest jump ever in the AP top 25 history. So Florida making a huge win. They dominated this game 38-10. Will Greer had 4 touchdowns, I believe, for he's the quarterback for Florida. And just a big win for Florida really shows that maybe they are for real and they deserve some consideration for the college football playoff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say for my upset, it's gotta be Arizona State over UCLA because you got this 2-2 non-ranked Arizona team going up against a 4-0 UCLA team, and you come out and beat that team in UCLA by 15 points. That is just outstanding. I mean, yeah, I know that there's been other upsets, but to me this one is just the biggest one. Especially since not only did they win on the road, but they won by more than 2 touchdowns against a ranked team. So that's got to be my upset of the week for college football.
And
Yeah.
Annie, I just wanted to add a couple of things on to Jack's thing. Talking about that game, it was a pretty good game for the most part, but then Arizona State started to run away with that game, and they looked really good. I mean, this is a team that lost 42-14 against the other LA team, USC. So definitely a big win. They showed people that they are still for real. They aren't ranked, but they're 2-2 now, I believe. I could be wrong, but yeah, just a big win for the Sun Devils. I'm certainly gonna have to see more though from this team in order to see if they're a top 25. But definitely a big win for the Sun Devils.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I sort of want to talk about a couple other upsets within the league, but one that really stood out to me, especially for fans of Notre Dame, was that Clemson Notre Dame victory. I mean, I know Matt is a big Notre Dame fan, and this was just
Yes.
a crushing loss for Notre Dame, and they basically just switched spots with Clemson. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, Clemson is now ranked number 6 and is a legitimate college football playoff contender, and Notre Dame drops all the way down to 15, which is just huge. And I think what we could take away from this game was Notre Dame is still good. It was just Clemson was better, and that's obviously why Clemson is now in the top 10 rather
Yep.
than outside,
If
just barely outside of it.
if you don't mind me adding to this, but to be honest, I did not find this that huge of a loss to Notre Dame because when you think about it,
Right.
if a team that's within 6 rankings, this should not be a big upset if the higher ranking wins. I mean, I personally think that it was just a hard fought battle, and I mean, in this game could have gone either way. I mean, Notre Dame, I mean, they lost on a 2 point conversion. That shows heart and determination. And yeah, it was a tough loss, but I mean, Notre Dame, they're still a good team, and you cannot doubt them. So I said, they're still going to get a good bowl game at the end of the year.
Yeah, and another thing I wanted
Can I say something about
Yeah,
that game
sure,
quick?
sure.
Yeah, Notre Dame is still a legitimate contender for the playoff in my mind. Yes, this was a tough loss for them. It wasn't necessarily a must-win game, but you kind of almost had to win it. Clemson looked really good, I'm not going to lie. In the first half, I think they pretty much dominated it. Notre Dame did look a little sloppy in the first half, but in the second half, this team came out and played with heart. They really showed that they weren't going to give up, and Clemson, they were just a better team, and that's just how it ended. So I think for Clemson, this team has solidified themselves as legitimate contenders. They don't have a super difficult schedule left, and Notre Dame doesn't have a super difficult schedule left either. So this was kind of the big game for both of these teams. So is Clemson the better team? We're just gonna have to wait and see.
Well, and what I was going to say was that, Notre Dame has that one more big game against two more big games, one against USC and then the other against Stanford, both ranked teams right now, and they're
Right.
both are just 2 spots behind Notre Dame. So I think if they want to win, then they're gonna have to win those 2 games to get into the playoffs. And Clemson has their only real test after this. I'd say is Florida State, who's ranked number 11, I think, right now. So that's going to be a big game, and if Clemson wins that, they could be a legitimate option in the playoffs, just like Utah with that 5-spot jump.
Yeah, they didn't even play this week, and they made this was definitely the week for Utah to have a bye and kick their feet up and just watch the show that unfolded. And you look at this. I'm gonna read off some of these top 10 teams before Ohio State. Number 1, they barely held on to beat Indiana. Indiana had a great game. Definitely maybe a little bit of a scare for Ohio State fans. And then another big scare at the number 2 team, Michigan State. They barely beat Purdue this weekend. Purdue is 1-4, or they were 1-3 coming into this game. So definitely Michigan State looked a little rough out there, and Ole Miss loses. So definitely some shakeup in, Georgia, another top 10 team that loses. Notre Dame at number 6, dropping down to 15 after their loss. So definitely the top 10 took a big hit, and Utah certainly benefited from that.
Yeah, yeah. And I'd like to point out two more games that were interesting. And two more games that are coming up. I thought one game that was interesting was that California game against Washington State. I said earlier in the last episode that, it's going to be an easy game, but it really wasn't. And California just barely won by, I think
they won by a touchdown or so.
Yeah, here, I'll look that up.
But can I just say one more thing about a team I was disappointed with?
Yeah.
Well, you guys were talking about how Minnesota had a chance to beat Northwestern. To be honest, this Minnesota team has not looked very good this season. In week 1, they had a great game against TCU. They only lost by 3 or 4 points. They looked really good, and that's when I thought, okay, this Minnesota team is the team we saw last season where they popped into the bottom half of the top 25. At the end of last season, Minnesota made a New Year's Day bowl, and that was big for this team. And now, they've lost some really tough games. They've barely beat Ohio. So this is a team that certainly has to, put things behind them. I'm really concerned, to be honest with you, with the Gophers at this point. They also barely beat Kent State and Colorado State. Those are teams that the Gophers should be beating by a large margin. And they've got Michigan, Ohio State, and Iowa all against ranked teams. And they also have Wisconsin and Nebraska too. So not going to be an easy schedule for Minnesota. I'm definitely been disappointed with the Gophers so far.
Yeah. That was one of my upset picks, but they just shut out by the Northwestern team, which keeps on proving, that they are what everyone thinks they are, like a good team this year. And I think that's been true throughout with that killer victory over a Minnesota team. And another thing I wanted to talk about, another game. Sorry.
Can I just interrupt? I just want to add something to Northwestern. They've got a big game coming up against Michigan this weekend. This is a 13th ranked Northwestern against 18 Michigan. 3:30 Eastern on Saturday at Michigan at the Big House in Ann Arbor. Going to be a big game for Northwestern because this is going to show if they are for real or not. I think they've got a chance to really boost themselves. Not a whole lot of ranked games this weekend, though. I believe this is the only 2 top 25 teams playing each other.
Yep.
So Northwestern, this is a big game for them.
3 games.
There's 3? What
the 3 games are UCLA, Stanford, so number 18 versus number 19, and then
Cal and Utah.
Yeah, Michigan versus Northwestern 15-20, and then I think the last one is California number 21 versus Utah number 5.
23 for Cal, but yep.
Yeah. So those are. Oh, and I forgot to add this. This is probably the biggest game. Actually, is Texas A&M and Alabama. Alabama. Or wait, never mind. That's 2 weeks from now. Sorry.
Yeah.
Texas A&M is on a bye, but otherwise, just looks like easy games for a lot of these top 10 teams. So it'll be interesting to see how Northwestern fares and how that Pac-12, those 2 Pac-12 games play out.
Do you guys have anything else to add about this crazy weekend in college football? Jack, you got anything or?
Well, I'd just like to point out one of the biggest blowouts of the season, or not of the season, excuse me, but out of the top 25 teams, at least the biggest blowout of the week. It was a big one, but it did happen. It did happen to be Boise State defeating Hawaii 55-0. And I know, Hawaii, they're not much. Same with Boise State, but just want to point that out. And another big one too is Stanford winning 55-17 over Arizona. So that was another big blowout there.
I also wanted to add one more thing. I'll talk about Boise State and then I'll get to another team quick. But Boise State has also looked really well this season. I did happen to watch some of that game they had against Hawaii. They looked really well, not going to lie. They were throwing the ball well. They've had wins. They did lose against BYU, but they're still a good team. Still a good team. So, I think this team definitely has a chance to get into a good bowl game this year.
Yeah.
And that's all about I can say. And then I also wanted to add one thing. The Texas Longhorns, boy, have they been a very disappointing team this year. They've had a very tough schedule. I will give them that. But they have certainly not looked good. They have had probably the toughest schedule out of anyone in Division I football. They played Notre Dame in Week 1. They beat Rice, but then they played Cal, Oklahoma State, and TCU, and then they got Oklahoma and Baylor. So Texas, they've looked bad, but somewhat bad. But I think this, Charlie Strong, their head coach, has certainly been under a lot of talk about, well, this has been a terrible start. I'm going to give Texas some credit. They have had a difficult schedule. They played against Notre Dame. They did get beat pretty bad, but they put up again a good show against Cal and Oklahoma State, some of the bottom-ranked teams. But then, TCU, they did look bad this weekend, but things aren't going to get easier for Texas, and unfortunately, they just kind of got some bad luck in the scheduling.
Yeah, and especially with this week right now, Oklahoma State with a loss and then a huge blowout against TCU. TCU just blew them out of the water. And now against number 10, Oklahoma this week. It's just been a tough season for Texas, but I think that what really stands out to me is that Cal win, because I think that was really the win where Cal proved themselves that they're a good football team this year, and and Texas sort of proved they're not a good football team.
All right, guys, we are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will be dissecting the MLB postseason. There is a lot to talk about in that, so we will talk about that when we come back.
And we're back here at the Everything Sports Podcast with Matt Harrington and Jackson James. So, the MLB playoffs, they're starting tomorrow. Lots of hype around this year. Definitely with the Royals being a 1 seed, the Cardinals being a 1 seed, the Yankees making it in, the Cubs making it in. So, Matt, what are your picks for these first 2 games, the wild card games? What are your picks?
Well, for the first one, I'm going to have to go with here, let me talk about the matchup first. It's the Astros at the Yankees. But I'm going to have to go with the Houston Astros in this one. This may be a little bit of a surprise to you because the Yankees are the home team and the top seed. But I believe in this Astros team. This is a team that has had 3 100-plus loss seasons in a row. I have faith in this team. I believe this team can go far in the postseason. But, I don't... One thing that does concern me a little bit is, can they get past Keuchel, or... I'm sorry, can they add more arms than Dallas Keuchel, who is the starter for the wild card game? They do have Scott Kazmir, but other than that, it's not really much of something to be excited about in Houston. But guys who have made some big offensive impact, Chris Carter, Carlos Correa certainly is going to be up for the Rookie of the Year award. Carlos Gomez, guys like that are going to be a big factor in this wild card game. But it's definitely going to be a good game. Masahiro Tanaka will be going for the Yankees. But I think the Astros really are the better team. The Yankees almost blew this 5-game lead they had for home field advantage, so they were lucky to get out with a win. Actually, both of these teams lost on the last day, but they were lucky to get that top seed. But for me, I will talk about the Astros as we get a little bit further into the postseason. But the Astros are my pick to win this AL wildcard game.
So what about the NL? Pirates and Cubs. Haven't seen the Cubs in the playoffs forever.
Yeah.
Great season. So
certainly, this to me is going to be the better wild card game. certainly the AL one will be good too. But these are two teams that this is the second and third best teams in the whole entire MLB this year. But unfortunately, they're all stuck in a division with the Cardinals and the Cubs and then the Pirates. So these are the top three teams in the division were actually the top three teams of the entire league. So obviously impressive there. But for me, I'm going to have to go with the Cubs in this one. This is a tough decision for me because you're going to have Jake Arrieta for the Cubs, 20-win guy. He's an incredible pitcher. That under 1 ERA is what really just gets to me, is the fact that this team will win. And for the Pirates, they're going to be throwing Garrett Cole, who could also be a very well Cy Young candidate as well. I assume Arrieta will be nominated, probably along with Greinke and maybe somebody else, but, the Cubs really looking good. I think what sets the Cubs apart from the Pirates is their ability to produce on offense. Pirates certainly do have that with McCutchen, Josh Harrison, guys like that. But the Cubs have guys like Anthony Rizzo. He's on fire right now for this team. And Chris Bryant is starting to get his bat back too. So, to me, the Cubs, I don't know if they have enough to take it far into the division series. But I hate to have the Pirates lose their third straight wild card game, especially considering the fact that they've been at home for all three. But to me, the Cubs, they are going to get past this game. It's going to be low scoring, but it's going to be, I think, my prediction, I'm going to add something to the score. I think it's going to be 2-1 Cubs in this one.
Yeah, all right. I definitely think that the Cubs have just the great pitching staff. Arrieta is just ridiculous, and I like you said, I feel bad for the Pirates. Betting against them in their third straight.
They get a bad draw every year, man. It's just unfortunate for this team.
Well, with the division with the Cardinals, who are just so good, it's hard to win. What's an interesting fact is that both of these teams are better than the 1 seed in the AL, which is who are the Royals, which really surprises me. And
they're better than any AL team to be that clear even. So. Yeah,
and another thing is that all 5 of the teams in the playoffs for the NL have all have 90+ wins, and only 2 teams in the AL have that. So I think that's really a big advantage for the NL and I think the NL series is definitely going to be, I'd say, a bit more interesting, but they're both going to be great playoffs.
And it's unfortunate for one of these teams, the Cubs or the Pirates, that one of their season is going to come to an end in just 9 innings. It's just tough to see that, because I really wish the wild card game could maybe be a 3-game series. Mm-hmm. How in the division series it's 5 games, and then it expands to 7 for the championship series and the World Series. It's unfortunate it has to end that way, but that's just kind of how it is. Sometimes you just don't get the luck of the draw, and for the Cubs or Pirates, one of these two teams is going to end in heartbreaking fashion.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to point out is that I think two of these matchups that are really interesting are the Dodgers and the Mets versus the Blue Jays and the Rangers, especially because, the Rangers barely held on to that title over the weekend. They barely clinched that spot. And then the Mets, who got just no-hittered by Scherzer, you're kind of wondering how they're going to fare against a Dodgers team that's pretty offensive.
And for me, this series will come down to pitching. You look at the Dodgers, they've got Zach Greinke, who in my mind will be the NL Cy Young winner, and they've also got Clayton Kershaw and some other guys too. So, excuse me, for the Dodgers, the Mets and the Dodgers both have very good. Excuse me 1 second.
Okay, there.
You're gonna have to cut that out, Avery.
Right.
I'm sorry. I just end it for a second, if you can. I choked on something.
I'll just cut it out.
Okay. Are you still recording right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, 1 sec. Just wait. I'm really sorry. couldn't hold it in any longer.
Okay, just say sorry about that, and then just
Okay. All right, I apologize for that. But as I was saying, both of these teams have very good starting rotations for the Mets. You've got Noah Syndergaard, Jacob deGrom, Matt Harvey, three very big names. And then for the Dodgers, you have Zach Greinke and Clayton Kershaw, which no doubt probably rivals that of the Mets. And this series, to me, is going to come down to who can throw the ball better. This is going to be the better, probably of all these division series. It's going to be the most defensive series for me. So the Dodgers, the Dodgers are my pick in this series. I'm going to say it ends in 4 games out of 5. But the Mets certainly are a very good team as well. But it's just going to come down to pitching, and I think that the Dodgers just have a little bit more of an edge than the Mets. But the Mets, I think, are definitely going to give the Dodgers a hard time.
Yeah, so I wanted to sort of talk about the Toronto and Texas series. I think this is going to be a series of batting, really, more than it is about defense. Because you got the Blue Jays team that has just run crazy with offense, and a Texas team also who, they had that really close game against the Angels that they lost 10-11, and they beat the Angels, was it 5-1 yesterday?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
They beat the Angels 5-1 yesterday. Is that correct?
I think it was like 9-2.
Yeah, 9-1 or something like that. And I think Texas just has a big bats, and so does Toronto. But the Blue Jays, I think they're going to be fueled. I think they're going to be ready to go. I just don't think Texas has it in them after playing a tough series against the Angels before this.
Yeah, Texas will have some time to rest, but, this team is very good as well. They have certainly, like the Blue Jays, have turned their season around. I think if you would have told me at the All-Star break the Rangers and Blue Jays would be playing in the American League Division Series, I probably would have laughed. And both these teams have turned it around really well. Rangers... it just comes down to hitting as well. This Toronto team is loaded with talent like, Edwin Encarnacion, Troy Tulowitzki, Josh Donaldson. Texas is the most offensive team in the MLB, and it is certainly going to show in this series. So I think the Blue Jays are going to win this series as well.
Yeah, all right. So championship game, who you got?
Well, in the AL, it would then be... Well, let's go back to the other division series quick. Since I picked Houston, they would be facing Kansas City. I'm going to have to go with the Royals in this one. Yes, Houston is a better team than they were a few years ago, but Kansas City has also improved very well a lot too, so... I say this series ends in 4 games too. Houston, I think, will give them a challenge, but like I said, KC's the better team. They made it to the World Series. They were the underdog that nobody thought would make it last year, so I think this is really big for them. They are probably going to be throwing guys like Cueto and Wade Davis. Wade Davis is probably going to be their starter, even though their game 1 starter, or at least their number 1 starter, even though most people thought it would be Johnny Cueto after they acquired him from the Reds at the deadline. But to me, this Kansas City team, they've got guys like Alex Gordon. They've also got pitchers like Kelvin Herrera who can really help. Hosmer, Moustakas, Morales.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on with these guys who are going to win this series. So, to me, Royals advance to the ALCS in this one.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. I mean, I think it might go just to 3 games even. I think it's just Royals are really just the better team against maybe a Houston or even a Yankees team. And after that, I'd say, we talked about Toronto winning, so Royals versus Toronto. I think I'm going sort of with a bold pick here. I think maybe Toronto, because...
I would agree. I would agree with that as well.
I mean...
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I think that the Royals, they're obviously the best team in the AL, but I feel obligated to want the Blue Jays to win, and I feel like they will, and I'd say 7 games. It's going to be close, but I think the Blue Jays pull it out with like a home run from Tulowitzki. I think that's really what it comes down to at the end.
Yeah, Game 7 would be played in Kansas City, and that place can get loud at the K. Kauffman Stadium. But, good team. That, I think, would definitely be the better ALCS out of any of the two. That one, I think, would more be another offense meets offense. Yes, Kansas City is good pitching, but, offense is better for them, too, I'd say. And then let's go to the other NLCS. I believe I picked... Well, I have St. Louis, and I picked
Dodgers.
Chicago.
Oh,
Chicago.
yeah. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah.
For that one, it's going to be 5 games, and I think, to be honest, I'm having second thoughts about this. St. Louis, I would pick 5 games, and St. Louis wins, but I may pick 4 again for this series because Yadier Molina, their catcher, is reportedly going to be ready for the postseason, and this guy is a big factor in why St. Louis has made deep postseason runs in the past. And so if they can have them back in the lineup, this St. Louis team is just as good as they looked in the regular season. So St. Louis either takes a sweep or 4 games. But, for the Cubs, I'd say it would be successful if the Cubs made it past 3 or 4 games. Cubs have certainly been a surprise to us this year. They've looked really well, and unfortunately, the Cubs just don't match with this Cardinals team, who has been built from the ground up from these past few years. They've completely dominated the regular season these past few years, and they have made some very deep runs in the postseason as well. So it's going to come down for me to the St. Louis. They will win this series if they can just keep on doing what they did in the regular season.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, I definitely pick the Dodgers too. I think they're just a better defensive team. Like you said, they have great pitching, and so then it would be Cardinals, Dodgers, and
this is another tough series to choose for me. Wow, it's just hard to tell, but the Dodgers have not really. They've been very disappointing in the postseason, and that's what it comes down to. And I'm going to have to say the Cardinals in this one.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be tough. I think it will end in 6 games. But the Dodgers, I hate to say it, but the Dodgers can't win in the postseason. And they have to do that in order to win a World Series. It happens every year. This team looks stacked, and they do well. They win the NL West. And then when it comes to the postseason, this team just can't find the pieces to put together. And the Cardinals are a very good team. So, to me, this series ends in 6 games, which sets up a Toronto and St. Louis World Series. What would you pick for that?
I'm going with St. Louis. They're just too good. Almost 100 wins. That's amazing. Only 100-win team this season, and I know it's very hard to do that. And so Yadier, like you said, Yadier Molina is gonna be back, and I just the Cardinals just a better team. I think they win in 6, probably.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
And for me, I'm going to go with the AL team. I'm going to go the Toronto Blue Jays are about to become world champions.
All right.
This team is built for this kind of situation now. They acquired Troy Tulowitzki. Well, here, let me start with off-season last year. This team acquired Josh Donaldson from the Oakland A's. Josh Donaldson had a big year last year in Oakland, and he had an even bigger year with Toronto this year. That's one of the main reasons Toronto got to where they were at the All-Star break. And then you add a big arm with David Price, who will be your number 1 guy in the postseason. And you also have added another big factor, Troy Tulowitzki. So in Toronto, they've got guys like Encarnacion as well, who, boy, he went on some insane hot streaks throughout the summer. So, Toronto, it's going to be good. It's going to be 7 games, but Toronto I believe they're going to win the World Series this year, but it's going to be really tough to see. St. Louis is certainly going to be just as good, if not even better. But, Yadier Molina is going to be a big role. Adam Wainwright out of the pen. But the reason why I don't pick this team, St. Louis, over is because they just lost another injury. Carlos Martinez. As you may know, Carlos Martinez got hurt. And, last year, you probably heard one of their prospects, Oscar Taveras, died in a car crash. obviously unfortunate and tragic news. It's certainly going to be tough to bounce back from that as well. Obviously, this guy was very talented. He was playing in the postseason last year for St. Louis. So, St. Louis, I just think injuries are going to be a factor. Adam Wainwright, we don't know how well he's going to pitch because he's coming back from an injury. But, St. Louis is going to definitely make another deep run this year. But in all, I think the Blue Jays are going to win the World Series this year.
Yeah, all right. Well, if you were wondering where Jack James was, he's not feeling so good. But we'll be back, and we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to finish off with some NFL talk. 6-4 undefeated teams this in week 4, so we're going to discuss that and some teams that really showed some fight in week 4 of the season. All right.
Welcome back, guys, to the Everything Sports Podcast. We are going to close out today with a little bit of NFL talk and stuff that happened over the weekend. There were some very good close games. I'd say out of all the weeks so far, this week definitely had the closer games. A lot of these games were decided within 2 touchdowns. Let's talk about the 4-0 teams, though, Avery. The Denver Broncos, starting with them in the AFC West, they beat the Minnesota Vikings 23-20. What did you think of this game and how the Broncos played, or especially the Vikings as they fall to 2-2?
I gotta give a lot of credit to the Denver defense. The offensive line for the Broncos, they've really been struggling, and that's bad because, Peyton Manning, their main guy, you can't have him get hit too much. He's getting old, and if he takes a big hit, he might not come back. So I think what I took away was that the Broncos defense just is improved much, and this could be a championship defense. And if the offense develops a bit more with Hillman and Anderson, especially Hillman, who just ran crazy with that and a 72-yard touchdown, which was really quite amazing. I think that this Bronco team definitely could be a contender for the Super Bowl this year. And speaking of the Vikings, I think this Vikings defense is really good too, and only allowing 23 points, that's really good for Vikings, against a Broncos team that's just has always really been good in these past couple years. But one thing I gotta say about the Vikings is just Bridgewater, he's just not doing what he should be doing. He's not making a ton of right decisions, but he's making some right decisions, and I think if he needs to improve before the Vikings can even think about making the playoffs, especially with AP. He picks up with a lot of that slack, but he can't pick up all of Bridgewater's mistakes. So, yeah, that's what I gotta say.
All right, and let's go to another 4-0 team, the Atlanta Falcons. They come off with almost a 50-point day. They finished too shy of that with 48. Devontae Freeman, wow, he is having himself a career so far. 6 touchdowns in 2 games, 3 each. Certainly been a big help to my fantasy team. And anyways, going to that, Falcons, they're 4-0. They did play a pretty bad Houston team. They look really bad this year. But what do you think of the Falcons so far in their season?
The Falcons are they're just wowing me. Especially Devontae Freeman. Here's a stat I want to put down. Devontae Freeman has the most fantasy points in 2 career starts ever. 69 fantasy points in 2 career starts. And that is a record. It was tied by Arian Foss. The older record was Aaron Foster in 2009 with 66, and Miles Austin, Dallas receiver, with 66. But it was interesting that he broke that record against the Texans, and Arian Foster, a big disappointment coming back. A lot of fantasy owners expected him to do great. Didn't do so good. But what I got to take away from this Falcons team is they're balanced. I mean, they had a lot. I believe they had 2 touchdowns off of defensive plays, and and just the rest were just Devontae Freeman and Matt Ryan really just doing what they're supposed to finally. And yeah, I really like this Falcons team, and I think that they could beat. I think they could beat the Panthers out in the NFC South and get that top spot.
All right, let's go to another 4-0 team, the Green Bay Packers. They had a big win against the San Francisco 49ers this weekend. 17-3 the final. Aaron Rodgers, again, putting up some pretty good numbers. But Green Bay, once again, 4-0. They've picked up wins against the Bears, Seahawks, Chiefs, and then, like I said this weekend, the 49ers. So what do you think so far of the Packers season, or what can you say about San Francisco?
Well, okay, one thing I gotta say about San Francisco is that Colin Kaepernick, he's not working out. A lot of people are discussing this, and a lot of people have lots of opinions, but my opinion on Colin Kaepernick is he's becoming a Tebow. He's really becoming a Tebow. A couple good years, he's a star, and now he's just depleting. I believe he was sacked 7 times, and maybe this is sort of the offensive coordinator's fault, but also he rushed more times than Carlos Hyde, who proved in week 1 that he is a monster back. Kaepernick rushed 10 times while Carlos Hyde only got 8 touches on the ball, which I think if they ran it more and maybe stopped relying on Kaepernick, then they definitely could have beat that Packers team, which, you know, they had control most of the game because Kaepernick was just not good. And, well, I think what I got to take away from Packers is they're proving that even without Jordy Nelson, they're a good team, especially the defense has just been really working hard. And like I said, I think 7 QB hits on Kaepernick, and he's a pretty mobile guy, so I thought that was really interesting. I think this Green Bay Packers team is I think they're my pick to win the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, and to continue with the Niners, certainly Colin Kaepernick has been a disappointment. This is a guy a couple years ago when Alex Smith missed an injury, everybody's like, he is the second coming. This guy had it all, and he did really well for a while. At one point, he was like in the top 5 fantasy QBs, and now it's just kind of falling apart. And so maybe it is time to cut ties at the end of the year or bench him and see what can work out. Do you happen to know who the backup quarterback is in San Fran?
I'll look. I'm not sure. Here, I'll look that
But
up.
anyway, continuing with the Niners, this team is not – they're horrendous this season. They had a good week 1 against the Vikings, but you can argue that the Vikings weren't ready. They got crushed by Pittsburgh, and they got crushed by Arizona. So this team isn't scoring very many points, and the defense is allowing a lot of points. So
can I interrupt you there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Blaine Gabbert is the backup.
Blaine Gabbert, okay, former Jaguar QB. So
Yep. So Blaine
things
Gabbert
didn't work out there in Jacksonville, so I wouldn't expect them to work out in San Fran either.
Yeah,
so
definitely not.
All right, let's move to another 4-0 team here. The Cincinnati Bengals, they picked up a win this weekend against the Kansas City Chiefs, who have, to me, been a very disappointing team so far this season. But going back to the Bengals here, they're 4-0. What do you think of the way Carson Palmer has been playing so far for this team?
You mean Andy Dalton?
Andy Dalton. I'm sorry. I got mixed up there for a minute.
Well, what you were saying about the Chiefs, I think, is a bit sort of untrue in how you're saying that they're sort of, they have not been doing good. I think it's because they just had tough matchups. I mean, going up against the Packers last week, the Bengals this week, and the Broncos week 2 has, those 3 are all 4-0 teams, and
right.
And those 3 teams have just been really good, and their only win was against a Texas team that has just been Texans team, that has just been disappointing. But I think they could get a break against the Bears maybe or the Vikings. And they don't look like they have too bad of a schedule. I see the Browns and the Raiders and the Lions here, so I'm not too worried right now about the Chiefs, but definitely concerned that they're 1-3 right now. And what I got to take away from the Bengals is just their offense is just amazing. I think the offensive line protects Dalton very well. And I think AJ Green is he's just such a big target. And now we see that they established the run game with Bernard and Hill. It's just amazing to see this Bengals team turn around with some tough playoff losses recently, and I think they could easily win this division with a Steelers team that's 2-2, a Ravens team that's 1-3, and a Browns team that's 1-3. With last year, where all four of those teams were really big powerhouses. Now it's just the Bengals this year.
All right, and one last 4-0 team, Carolina Panthers. They've looked very well so far in the season as well. You can get into a little bit of Carolina here if you would like, but I wanted to ask one thing. Out of all the 4-0 teams, which team do you think is the weakest out of all of them? I can read off the options again as you want here. Carolina, Cincinnati, Atlanta, Green Bay, and Denver, and I may be missing one more.
Well, don't forget the Patriots, who are 3-0.
Patriots, that's right. They had a bye this week.
Yeah,
that's who I was forgetting.
I think the weakest out of these six undefeated teams, I think it's actually gotta be the Panthers. I think
I would agree.
Yeah, I think that, a 20-9 win against the Jaguars, they looked really good. A 24-17 win, that's kind of iffy. A 27-22 win, barely pulling away with that against the Saints. And then a 37-23 win, which was pretty impressive against the Bucs with that great showing of defense. But I just don't know. I just don't think they're the strongest, because here's what's happening is Cam Newton is just doing all the work, and the defense is putting a lot in, but I think they need more weapons on offense if they're really gonna excel. They don't have Kelvin Benjamin, and Ted Ginn has been decent, but and Jonathan Stewart has just not been good, so I think they need more weapons on offense. Cam Newton needs more options. He can't carry the team on his back the whole way. And a tough game gonna be against the Seahawks next week, so I think they're definitely the weakest team out of these six.
All right, well, that will conclude our podcast episode for this Monday, October 5th. We really appreciate you listening in today. We will be adding another day to our week, which we are really excited about. We will now be doing, instead of Monday, Wednesday, Monday, Friday, we're now going to be adding it so Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I'm really excited about that too. On Wednesday, we are going to be talking about a little bit of review from the AL wildcard game, previewing the NL, and we will also be talking about the NHL, which I'm very excited to see back. And so that will conclude our podcast today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here on the Everything Sportscast podcast. For Matt, Avery, and Jack, we are signing out.
Bye.